Welcome into the show. Today we're talking about Notre Dame, the Big 12, and NBC. Who would have thought? We're talking about all three of them together. CBS Sports' Dennis Dodd reported earlier this week that essentially Notre Dame and NBC are trying to find ways to keep Notre Dame independent. And the way to do that is to make more money, right? So right now, annually, Notre Dame is making $22 million, which is solid, but apparently they need to be in the ballpark of $75 million annually in order to stay independent. And so that led to all this kind of opinion pieces on, what's going to happen. And Dennis Dodd mentioned that, Notre Dame and NBC are kind of looking at the Big 12 as a potential partner for shoulder programming on NBC. Essentially what this means is when Notre Dame isn't playing, they would play Big 12 games and have Big 12 content around, the Notre Dame game. And that's a big deal, right? I mean, that gets the Big 12 brand on the NBC, which makes total sense. It allows Notre Dame to make more money because of their media agreement with NBC. Both of those agreements are up in 2025, the Big 12 and Notre Dame's with NBC, Notre Dame's agreement with them. So, I mean, it all kind of comes together, right? I mean, if they're both trying to have negotiations for the 2025 season and beyond, it kind of makes sense for them to potentially join up in this so-called alliance, right? So Dodd went on to mention that it could be in 2 to 3 weeks. That's kind of the timetable for this, but it's very interesting, and it kind of all leads back to the whole money part of things, right? And Notre Dame wants to make money, but they also want their independence from a conference. They've always loved that. For whatever reason, it's become perfect for them. And while I've sat here and thought, hey, the Big Ten makes perfect sense for Notre Dame, well, I don't think Notre Dame necessarily believes that. I think they believe they're stronger on their own without having anyone else dictating them outside of their media partner, NBC. And so for that reason, they're exploring these options. And it comes at a very interesting time because if you look at what the Big Ten is doing right now, they're about to sign a $1 billion deal, probably with Fox as their primary partner. But they're also going to have other media partners as well. And NBC is bidding on that, along with a few others, likely ESPN, to try to air, some of their content as well. And so the Big Ten's looking around, and while the Big Ten's looking around trying to increase their media value, you have Notre Dame doing the same. And it's just interesting to me that they're turning towards the Big 12. Now, Notre Dame's side, this is all about being independent, right? It's all about getting to that $75 million number. It makes total sense for them. Now, as far as the Big 12 goes, it makes total sense for the Big 12 as well. And they should be doing everything they can to make this happen for a couple reasons. First of all, it strengthens your relationship with one of the premier programs in college football. It gives you an opportunity to get your foot in the door. And this is what the ACC thought they were doing with Notre Dame as well when they did the scheduling alliance with them. But the Big 12 is actually being smarter about it because if you're able to get into a media relationship with NBC and Notre Dame, I think it strengthens the likelihood of Notre Dame being actually interested in joining the Big 12. Obviously, this is all about remaining independent, so that there's a lot of factors that go into it. But I think if they see this work out really well for NBC and the Big 12 together, then it might raise some eyebrows and make them go, ooh, you know what? Maybe we should just go ahead and join and be a part of it. The other part of the Big 12 is eyeballs, right? So you're trying to be fresher and be cool and hip and trying to add to your social media just gains on that side as well. And I think if you look at what the Big 12 is doing, they're just trying to create a bigger sphere of influence. And I think when you're able to get a media contract with NBC, you're putting yourself in kind of a different tier of programming. And that live programming is massive. And people have talked about it a ton. And the Big 12 knows they have to get creative with their next media deal. And I think one with Notre Dame and specifically with NBC makes a ton of sense. Will it happen? Who knows? But I think we will get an answer in the next few weeks. And I think the Big 12, again, needs to stay aggressive right now. Stay aggressive with these new ideas and continue to seek out partners, seek relationships, and just try to build on what they're already building. And I mean, as these Pac-12 schools make their decisions and if the Big 12 adds anyone, that's great. But right now, the Big 12 still has to focus some on their 12 schools that they currently have. And getting a media deal like this would be huge for the conference. So later on this week, I'm going to talk more about some predictions throughout the week, and we'll talk about realignment probably a little bit more next week. But for today's show, this has been Grayson Grunhafer. Thanks for listening.